Well, can I welcome you all here in this room, in the Tara, members of the Sangha, esteemed and honoured guests. Thank you for coming to these talks. These are the Numata, centenary Numata lectures. They're important. We're covering a very wide range of subjects, and we've started this particular summer series with talks on the Mahayana, and we have the honor of having Charles Muller, Charles Muller, with us all the way from Tokyo. We'll be talking to us tonight and tomorrow night and that'll be the end of this particular series, and we go on to the next lot. But I'll tell you something about Charles. He was born in 1953. He's a Japan-based academic. He specializes in Korean Buddhism and East Asian Yogacara. He's published numerous books and articles, one of the earliest developers of online research and resources for the field of Buddhist studies, and the founder and managing editor of the Digital Dictionary of Buddhism, the CJKV English Dictionary, and the H Buddhism Scholars Information Network, along with having digitized and published numerous reference works. And tonight, I'm really honored that he's with us, and we'll be speaking on the structure of the mind-only perspective. This gets people very muddled, and we're going to have some clarification tonight from Charles. And I see the title of the talk is The Person. But I should say that this is one of Charles's books. It's in our library. He's written numerous books. The Sutra of Perfect Enlightenment, Korean Buddhism's Guide to Meditation. So those of you who are interested in further reading, this is one of his books. Charles, can I welcome you? Thank you. And there will be time for some questions.
Yes. Okay. Thank you very much, Desmond. Thank you all for coming. Some of you here a second time. It's nice to see. And so last time, put on my glasses. So, somewhat continuing on last week's lecture. So last week's lecture was kind of deconstructive. That is, what approaches in Buddhism allow them to say that there is no self. And I analyzed this problem from the point of view of the earliest Buddhist teachings, and in connection with the law, with the principle of cause and effect, saying that in Buddhism, Buddhists are very thorough, that every occurrence, everything, every person, every event has cause and is also an effect. And cause and effect means that everything is generating everything, but it also means there is no single central I, no single central self that can be identified. So the Buddha had criticized the early Indian view of a permanent, everlasting, undying, unchanging self called in Sanskrit Atman, translated into Chinese with the character wo, or in Japanese ga. This doesn't mean that people don't exist. It just means they don't exist as something that has a permanent, unchanging identity. And the idea that we have a permanent, unchanging identity, it's not like I wake up in the morning and say, oh, I have a permanent, unchanging identity. But we tend to think that way. We tend to think in terms of the word is reification, hardening things into entities, and ourself included. So we live and act as if we are unchanging entities, when in fact according to Buddhism, we aren't. So what does exist? A mind and body that are impermanent, a mind and body that are dependently arisen, as in the 12-link model we looked at last week, and the network model discussed in the last lecture. This has a very positive meaning in the sense that it is exactly because we are impermanent that we can grow and change into something better or something worse, hopefully better, and that it's on that basis that you can have Buddhist practice, because Buddhist practice is aimed at eradicating the flaws and developing the strong points of our character. So that is all possible because of impermanence. Because the world is impermanent, it means that our suffering will also eventually disappear. And in Japan is, it's a great country. I've lived in it for over 30 years, but one of its bad points is that there's a lot of suicides among young people, among students who are taking, especially students who are taking entrance exams, or students who are bullied, and they end up taking their own lives. And every time I hear this kind of story, I wish I could have had a chance to talk to them, to tell them that because of impermanence, your suffering will also eventually go away in one way or another. And I use this for myself when I'm suffering. I remind myself that this suffering is eventually going to disappear because of impermanence, no matter what I do about it. So impermanence, people tend to take, in Japanese, mujo, which means impermanence. It's usually taken in a negative sense. And quite often people take impermanence in a negative sense. But impermanence in Buddhism also has a positive meaning. So you're probably familiar with this, but I'll remind us. The body and mind, human being in early Buddhism, not just the human being, but all mammals, most other animals, are formed of what are called 5 aggregates, 5 skandhas. And the first one, form, is matter in general, the body, our materiality, our physical existence. The second is feeling. That's receptive or sensory function. Receptive or sensory in the main sense of our 5 senses, taking in information, but also feelings of anger or feelings of resentment, things that come in from the outside and disturb us. The third is called perception, samjñā, which refers to the images that surface in the mind, or symbolic function. So we see we see a flat object hanging on the frame over there, and it has a handle, and it's white, but to call it a door is the function of samjñā, to put those things together into an entity and give them a label. That's a very important perception of our way of thinking. The fourth, very important impulse, is samskara, which is will, intention, or the mental function that accounts for craving, the power of formation potential. It is also understood as the general mental functions not included in the aggregates of feeling or perception. So I want something, I will do something, I will go somewhere, I will take action. That's samskara. And the fifth is consciousness, vijnana, the cognitive or discriminating function. And that means that outside of these five, in our existence, in our mental existence, there is nothing else. You know, modern psychology, I haven't studied in a couple of decades, but of course you have Freudian categories like ego, id, and various gatherings of functions, but probably considering that this is in the 4th century BCE, this is fairly sophisticated as a way of looking at the way the human mind and body operate. And this is long before Yogacara or mind-only Buddhism. This is in early Buddhism. These 5 aggregates are said to function in the 18 spheres. So 18 spheres means 6, 6, and 6. These include the 6 faculties, there's 6 objects, and the 6 consciousnesses. So the 6 sense faculties are eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and mind. 6 objects are the field of form, field of sound, field of odor, gustatory field, tactile field, and conceptual field. The 6 consciousnesses are seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, and knowing. In comparison with modern ways of looking at the mind, to consider the number 6, mind, or conceptualization, as one of the 6 sensory organs is kind of a novel thing. But so the eyes have color and shape as object, and ears have sound as object, and nose has smell, odor as object, and tongue has taste, and body has hard and soft and wet and cold, fast and slow as object. But the mind's object is what? 2 things. Words, linguistic entities, and images. Same as a computer. Text and image, right? So mind handles text and image. So in the early Buddhism, along with the 5 skandhas, the human existence is considered to be enveloped in these 6 senses, with the mind covering everything mental. This is a graph of the relationship that I just mentioned. The problematic points in the 6 consciousness view of the mind is that if Buddhism teaches reincarnation, but at the same time teaches no self, what exactly is reincarnated? When the body dies, the 5 aggregates and 6 consciousnesses have to disappear. When we die, everything is based on the body. The mind is based on the body, sensation, everything is based on the body. So when we're gone, what's left? So in other forms of Indian thought, you could say, well, what's left is the Atman, some kind of soul. But Buddhism denies the existence of an Atman. So in Buddhism, there should be nothing left. And that's a problem. Furthermore, and this is especially a Buddhist problem, so general Indian religious philosophy around the time of Buddhism, basically most of the religions believed that in some way, when we die, when we are reborn, our next rebirth will have some in some way be affected, be generated by what we did in the previous lifetime. And so, if that's the case, how does that happen? If there's nothing, if when we die there's nothing there, and if you say, well, it goes with the Atman, but the Atman is not changeable, so it can't be carried on the Atman. So this is a point of perplex. Actually, how does the transfer of merit or the transfer of demerit occur? So, and at the same time, along the same line of reasoning, if Buddhism is a path to enlightenment based on practice, how is the merit of that practice accumulated? So, if I do zazen, if I do meditation every day, and I practice the Vinaya, I practice morality, and I do charity, and I do all these good things, where is that merit accumulated? All Buddhist sects believe that the merit is accumulated, that some good result will come from good actions. So what about Buddhism? And even more basic, how do we retain any information at all? So, shooting a basket, our memory is in our mind, it's in our eyes, it's in our elbows, it's in our fingertips, it's in our toes, it's our knees, it's in our whole body. And that memory stays in those areas of our body. It stays in our arms and elbows. And if we continue practicing basketball, we'll get better at it, no matter who we are. So that means that memory is increasing in our body and mind. Where is it increasing? Where is it being kept? So it's the same thing for advantageous activities, activities helping other people and helping oneself. Where is that positive energy kept? That was the problem that Buddhists had to solve. And so, another interesting thing about early Indian philosophy and Buddhism is that for a long time, from early times up until recently modern times, people from various schools, Buddhism and Jainism and Vedanta and so forth, would get together for public debates. And they would debate the points. So they shared the same languages. They shared a lot of the same concepts: karma, reincarnation, virtue, non-virtue. So it was possible for them to get together in one forum and to debate these topics. So when the Buddhists got up to debate, their opponents would put these kind of questions to them. If you say there's no self, then what is there? And the Buddhists were in a difficult position. So, to answer these questions correctly, Buddhist scholars needed to provide a detailed map of the mind. And this is, I'm oversimplifying things, but this tendency resulted in the formation of something called the Yogacara school. Yogacara school is an Indian Mahayana school arising in the 4th to 5th centuries, founded by the brothers Asanga and Vasubandhu. And Yogacara is a combination of two words, yoga meaning meditation and achara meaning practice. Later on it would be called the School of Consciousness Only. In Japanese it's called Yuishiki. in Japan, the school still exists. It's called the Hosso School, and it has its headquarters at the Kofukuji Temple in Nara. These two brothers, the early Yogacara thinkers, tried to solve the problem by saying the mind has two levels. The first is the conscious level, which I showed you in the chart above, with the 6, 6, and 6. This set of functions. So in the earlier model, what we call the Abhidharma model, this is all there is. And the mental part, the mind, includes everything, memory and like and dislike and so on and so forth. But Yogacharans said there's a second level of consciousness, an unconscious or subconscious level. And this is a new theory at the time. It's not that people were unaware that dreams were happening, things were happening at a different level of the mind, but to clearly state that the mind has two levels, that there's a level of the mind that's functioning without our awareness. So that means some important part of our mind is functioning all the time, and we have no control over it, but it's kind of influencing us and creating us. So in the subconscious domain, there are two further levels. The first is called the manas consciousness, which is also called the ego consciousness, defiled consciousness, and so forth. And it is numbered as number 7. The second is the alaya consciousness, which is also called the store consciousness, root consciousness, or seed consciousness. It is numbered as the 8th consciousness. So alaya means storage place. Like a Himalaya is a place where snow is stored. The same Sanskrit root. Unlike the 6 manifest consciousnesses, which have gaps, these 2 consciousnesses function continuously without interruption. So 24/7, all our lives. When we're awake or when we're asleep, the manas and the alaya vijnana are functioning. And functioning means they're doing what? The alaya consciousness, the 8th, the store consciousness, is the most fundamental layer of the mind. It is the base and support of the other 7 consciousnesses and the base of individuated existence. It stores the karma of all of our words, thoughts, and deeds in a form that is thought to be like seeds. The process of impregnating seeds is called perfuming. When the right circumstances appear, the seeds will sprout, giving rise to new behavior, nature, and characteristics. So what is being said here, if I practice shooting a basketball and my friend also practiced shooting a basketball, I may not improve at all. And my friend might improve the next day and get much better. So is the effort the same? Why does one person improve and the other doesn't? And if my friend improves faster than me, what's happening to my effort? So in the Yogacara view would be that the effort is basically the same. But if my friend improves faster than me, that means my friend already has an inclination from a past life or previous time that allows existent seeds to germinate, where in my case they don't. But the amount is the amount of seeds that are generated and are impregnated into ourselves is fundamentally the same. So, one of my main hobby from the age I was 16 till about the age of 60 was doing karate. And I was lucky to learn. Part of the reason I became interested in Japan, a big part of the reason I became interested in Japan is because I became a student of a very famous, very strict Japanese karate teacher. And he had a dojo in New York City. I used to go in there and train. And so I trained for a long time, and I took the instructor's training course, and I got a license as a teacher, and I had a high rank, and I participated in competitions. We all had to participate to really win tournaments, but I had a teaching ability, and I was able to discipline and encourage students. So, you know, the effort generated differently inside of me than others. Mm-hmm. But I will say that after 20 years, and I was getting close to 40, suddenly something happened to me. And everything became very clear, and I began to win. But I had to wait a long time for that to happen. But, you know, I realized, wow, you know, something, so there's something to the recommendation to stick with it. And so all skills can be seen in this way. So identical twins learn the same thing together, but identical twins have completely different personalities and completely different tendencies and so on and so forth. So modern science, modern psychology, modern biology still don't have the answer to this. And if you look in almost every religion, every culture, the question of nature versus nurture, which is more important, which has more effect on us, is always present. And in Buddhism, it's not nature versus nurture. They're all part of one continuum. So changes that occur in our present in our present lifetime, based on our present study and our present efforts, are called nurture, but they're not different from nature. Just that nature takes a longer time to change and grow. But both, it's like a deeply running river. So you have the surface level, and that's like our 5 consciousnesses and 6 consciousnesses. And then in the middle, you have the manas consciousness, which I'll talk about after. And then at the very bottom, you have the alaya vijnana, which is always functioning below, supporting everything. And which is why, as I said in the last lecture, we can change the course of a river slowly, but we can't turn it 90 degrees, because the power of karma, the power of energy, keeps flowing. So the Yogacara school has a huge amount of very thick texts that explain the theory of the 8 consciousnesses. And well, I'll talk more about history later, but so how is karma transmitted from this lifetime to the next lifetime? When a person dies, the store consciousness, which is made of seeds, metaphorical seeds, continues on until it forms a new being at the time of conception. The seeds serve as a kind of template for the next life. This is why people are born naturally possessing certain characteristics, abilities, and so forth. But the manas consciousness is also functioning at the subconscious level, 24 hours, 7 days a week. And what is it doing? Like the store consciousness, the manas functions 24/7, which is different from the sixth consciousness. And here I should make it clear. You have the first 5 consciousnesses. By the way, anybody who wants any of these slides, I'm willing to share them with you. I'm very happy to share them with you by email or whatever. So the sixth consciousness is the thinking consciousness. The sixth consciousness deals with language, deals with images, deals with emotions, deals with the world. Seventh consciousness is similar, but its thinking ability is very primitive. It doesn't deal with words and language, but it deals with feelings of like and dislike. So when you walk down the street, you're just walking down the street and there's people around you and stores around you. You're not thinking, oh, I like this. No, I don't like this. I don't like this. I like this. But at the subconscious level, that is happening. And that's guiding your decision to go into this place or not go into this place. And it's not that the function of the seventh consciousness is separate from the sixth consciousness. They're mixed together in a kind of blend in this, but the seventh consciousness is influencing. And the seventh consciousness, you got ahead, thinks in a primitive way, simply distinguishing like and dislike. But a very important function of the seventh consciousness is that it sees the eighth consciousness and takes it to be the self, I. When I say it sees the eighth consciousness, so eighth consciousness, we all have a memory going back to when we're very tiny, and we can remember events from elementary school and middle school and high school and so on and so forth. And that stream of memory is what the manas sees, and the manas calls that I, calls that me. And the manas protects that. So the manas is basically called an afflicted consciousness. And so in terms of enlightenment really, I don't mean just some small insight that happens while you're in meditation, but an overwhelming change where you don't act selfishly anymore. At that time, the function of the manas is stopped, according to Yogacara. And if it's stopped completely, then you become Buddha. But most people don't reach that level so easily. But we have the word in Buddhism, affliction or defilement. The manas is considered to be the source of all selfishness and affliction. It is also called the defiled mind. So that means that I do meditation, so I use a metaphor of meditation. But anyhow, we do any kind of moral training or meditation and trying to do good for others. That's all helpful, but that doesn't change the manas easily or directly. So how is the manas changed? Manas is changed by habituation over a long time, or by a deep insight that one has as a spiritual experience, whether that comes from oneself or from another power or whatever. but manas has that kind of activity. So this is a new chart, which includes the first chart, the six consciousnesses, plus the manas, the seventh consciousness, and the alaya vijnana. The alaya vijnana has as its faculty, as its function, storage. And the manas has as its function always assessing. So the manas is constantly assessing good or bad, or I want or I don't want. And in a sense, you could say manas is protecting us, because it's also sensing danger and going for positive things. So it's not like it's deeply evil, but it's subtly helping us look for our own advantage. And which is why it has to be. How does that keep happening? Okay, so the importance. So if you read a book on Yogacara, I'll recommend a good one shortly. If you read a good book on Yogacara, it will talk about all of this, but the main focus is to introduce and discuss the function of the eighth consciousness, the alaya vijnana. And the eighth consciousness functions in such a way that, so the green down below represents the eighth consciousness, and the yellow above represents all the rest of the consciousnesses, including the seventh consciousness. And so the eighth consciousness, the seeds from the eighth consciousness generate activity. So if you are born, whatever tendencies you have at birth, whatever activities you have within you, when you act, you generate yourself, and you generate your sensation, and you generate your intentions. So the seeds are producing the manifest world. But at the same time, manifest world, what you're doing in the manifest world is creating more seeds, which go back into the alaya vijnana. So it's a continuous circle of the alaya vijnana generating activity and generating, and that activity re-impregnating the alaya vijnana. So you can see from this perspective, obviously if you do good things, spiritual things, caring things, and you do spiritual practice, then the effect should eventually be good. How long it's going to take, that's another question. But nonetheless, that's the perception. There are several different ways of representing this relation of the consciousnesses. So this schematic, the alaya vijnana is in the middle, and the manas and ideation consciousness and the 5th century consciousness gradually radiate out. Another division of the 8 consciousnesses is between the conscious level and the subconscious level, which I've introduced already. Seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, and thinking are available to us in daily activity and also in light sleep. Deep sleep is only has the function of only functions in the subconscious level. So that's one way of dividing the 8. Another way of dividing the 8 is 7 and 1, in the sense that the first 7 consciousnesses are all germinated and all generated from the 8th consciousness, which is called the root consciousness, whereas the 7 active consciousnesses are called the 7 forthcoming consciousnesses. This diagram was originally in Japanese, and I converted it into English. But what this... So you have 2 lines. And the first is the line between, the above line crossing over is between, it divides subconscious and conscious. So the manas, the ego consciousness, and the alaya vijnana are at the subconscious level. The second line divides between life and birth, life and death. So at death, the manas disappears, and only the alaya vijnana continues. That's a Japanese version, which you can look at if you... Now, all I've talked about mind only or consciousness only in the sense of our function, our daily function. So some people say, so because of the way the alaya functions, the way it develops, basically what we are is nothing but habits. There's nothing else except habits, generated habits and regenerating habits. But the school is called, I don't know why that keeps moving. The school is, and this would be kind of a topic for another presentation, the school is called consciousness only or mind only. And it doesn't mean that our mind generates everything. It means that our experience is limited to what we cognize. There's nothing, if we can't cognize it, it doesn't exist for us. So, mind only means everything is only contained as a function of our perception or our memory or our desire and so forth. And there are a lot of debates about what this actually means. So, Buddhism is, of course you have relatively straightforward, more direct forms of Buddhism like Zen and Pure Land that just deal with practice. But the earlier Indian-based schools and Tendai Buddhism and Huayan Buddhism are very much theoretical. They have huge scriptural textbooks, and to study one of these forms of Buddhism takes an incredible amount of energy. But so even inside the school of Yogacara, there are many different factions. So when we discuss how does consciousness only, do objects really exist outside of us? This is a great debate surrounding Yogacara. Does that chair really exist outside of me? Or is that only contained within me? Even today, they're debating. I can say more about that later, but for the time being. In China, Korea, and Japan, and maybe Vietnam, I haven't checked, but the school that focused on consciousness-only thought, Yogacara school, later weakened, in some regions died out completely. That's mainly the case in China and Korea, and mostly the case in Japan. But more importantly, its doctrine was assimilated into other Buddhist schools, such as Huayan, Shenyang, that's Shingon, Tiantai, that's Tendai, Zen, Pure Land, etc. In other words, if you ask a Pure Land teacher, or you ask a Zen teacher, or you ask a Huayan teacher about karma, reincarnation, and the self, they're going to say basically the same things that the Yogacarans say, because they absorbed the Yogacara teachings into their systems. So Yogacara itself, to study it takes a lot of effort, because it's a huge, I just have shown you a small slice, but it's a huge system with many connected parts. But it works when you understand it. It fits together. So its doctrine was assimilated by other Buddhist schools. In Japan, it still exists. There are a few temples. The main one is Kofukuji in Nara. I'm friendly with the monk. Now, if you're interested in this and you want to dig a little more on your own, this book came out just a couple of years ago, Making Sense of Mind Only, Why Yogacara Buddhism Matters, by William Waldron. And Bill Waldron is about the same age as me, maybe 1 year younger. Basically, he's been working on this book since he was a graduate student. He wrote a lot of articles in between, but he's a very careful, very thorough writer. But eventually he got this out, and it's an excellent book. And it's excellent from an academic perspective, but it's also very readable, very accessible. You don't have to be a scholar of Yogacara Buddhism to get into it and understand it. And a lot of it makes sense for how we would conduct our daily lives. So Bill should give me some I don't know, money or prize or something. I wrote a book review of it, which will be coming out in the Eastern Buddhist in a couple of months, so you can see that. But better to read the book itself. There are a lot of other good books on Yogacara that have come out in the last 10 years. Jonathan Gold of Princeton has a very good book, and there's several good books that have come out. Now, I have another topic I could go on to, but I want to check the time.
You're a bit short. Start a new topic.
What time is it?
26 minutes past.
Oh, 26 minutes past. Oh, okay. All right, that's good. Okay. So, but first, let me ask if there are any questions at this point. Yes.
Can I thank you, Charles? It was very clear explanation or description
okay.
of yogacara.
Thank you.
Because people do get incredibly muddled and confused.
Yes.
I thought that was, you contributed enormous clarity to the
Good.
and simplification as well.
Yeah.
In the right sort of way.
Right.
I mean, there are similarities between, it's slightly off the subject, it's a bit of a rabbit hole, between that and Jungian theory, with the collective unconscious and the theory of archetypes,
that's right.
Archetypal theory.
Yeah, well, it was people like Jung who first began to pay attention to yogacara and take advantage of it. Yes, Mike.
Yeah, thank you. And what came to mind as you were speaking was that as a concept, it's quite hard to grasp. As you say, without giving care and attention to the theories. But what came to mind is the theory of evolution, which I would say generally people are quite ready to accept.
Yes.
But appears to me to be equally as bizarre in its notion that generally we have collectively evolved, even though as individuals we have very separate experiences and individual experiences of the world around us.
Right.
And yet it feels as though I have less trouble accepting that I feel a pang of fear when I'm standing at a height because perhaps an ancestor of mine fell once and we learned that that was risky. And yet, almost in the same way, it must happen, without a sort of a direct passing on of experience, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've contributed anything by saying that, but it's...
So I mentioned before about Kofukuji, and the head monk, his name is Tagawa Shune, and I've been teaching this in Japan for a long time, and teaching this kind of material to undergraduates is not easy, but I think that if you put it in a certain way, it can be easy. So I was searching for an accessible introductory book, and there are a lot of them in Japan. Introduction to Yogacara, Yuishiki Nyumon. But the one I found the best was one by this Tagawa. And I translated, actually, after I used it for a few years, I translated it into English under the title Living Yogacara. It's published by Wisdom Publications. It's a relatively short book, which is not as thorough as Waldron's book. But anyhow, in that book, Tagawa goes through kind of the same course of discussion that I've gone through, but in the last chapter, the last section of the last chapter, he brings up the relationship between Yogacara and modern science. And the question that he gets asked the most is Yogacara related to or compatible with evolutionary theory? And especially the idea of DNA. So DNA, we are born with a certain formation of DNA that patterns us, right? And is that the same as the seeds that we were born with that pattern us? And he kind of he doesn't want to get involved in that kind of debate, so he kind of rejects that idea, but saying it's an interesting question. But it's a similar way of thinking because, generally speaking, evolutionary theory says we can change and develop ourselves by our activities, and species can go in a certain direction. But of course, Charles Darwin didn't believe in reincarnation, as far as I know. So the idea of generating seeds that would direct one's future lifetime is not is not really acceptable in that system. Yes.
Well, there are some theories around what they call epigenetics.
Yes.
Where certain genes can be switched on in one's own life.
Okay.
And some of those can be inherited.
Okay.
So, that would suggest,
okay.
I mean, you wouldn't necessarily, but the next generation benefits.
Yeah, yeah.
And maybe you can be reborn into one of those or something, but it...
Yeah. Yeah, and so also, what was I going to say? In regard to the question of genetics, anyhow, but the basic way of thinking, I think, is similar. The fact that what you do creates. Oh, I know what I was going to mention. So the other question that arises from a scientific perspective is the question of giraffes. So giraffes have a long neck, right? And some people say their necks got longer because they were trying to reach the tall trees, and gradually they developed a longer neck. And I asked Bill about this. He said, "No way." That's rejected. But I disagree with him. I think if you look at the function of the eighth consciousness and how, so if I play tennis every day, my arm gets bigger and stronger and maybe a little bit longer. And when I began to learn ballroom dance, so in ballroom dance, you have to stand straight up with your spine stretched and your neck stretched and everything stretched. And after I did ballroom dancing for a year, I went for my physical checkup, and I had gained 2 centimeters. Yeah. So it was possible for me. Why not the giraffes? Any other questions in this conversation? So, Yogacara Buddhism is it's convenient in the sense that it is used in bits and pieces by other schools to explain reincarnation, to explain karma, to explain the effect of good behavior, to explain the effect of compassion. There was a I'll just mention briefly, I mentioned that within Yogacara there were different schools, different strands. And within Yogacara there was one specific strand that was very, very large and very influential, called the Tathagata Garbha strand of Tathagata Garbha strand of mind philosophy. And Tathagata means Buddha, the awakened one, and Garbha means kind of nest or covering. So kind of covered up. We're kind of covered up Buddhas. And so Tathagata Garbha emphasizes, they use the 8 consciousnesses and they use the basic Yogacara model, but their point is to convince people that they have something called the Buddha nature, or the enlightenment contained within them, and that enlightenment can be awakened. And like in Yogacara, they talk about faith, but in a minimal way, just as a kind of category. But in the Tathagata Garbha school, faith is the most important thing. The strong belief that I am a Buddha or I can become Buddha. Because to endure practice, to keep up practice, to keep making effort. People need a reason. People need something to drive them. And that is called, that's why it's called the Tathagata Garbha. And the Tathagata Garbha school had its own set of texts. So the most important one is the first one called the Srimala Devi Sutra, and also one text called the Ratna Gotra Vibhaga. And they talk about affliction and habituation and so forth, but they emphasize that faith is the most important thing. And so, and they discuss what faith is and how to generate it. And as time passed, in East Asia, the Yogacara school kind of faded away or was absorbed, where the Tathagata Garbha schools like Tiantai and Huayan and Zen and Pure Land grew and thrived based on this idea of the possession of original possession of the nature of enlightenment, and that becomes the focus. So people who took their path said that Yogacaras focused too much on the details of the function of the mind, whereas they should have just focused on faith. So if you get into the study of Yogacara, eventually you'll come across this word, and I just wanted to let you know what it is. And a whole nother, to explain a whole nother lecture session would be necessary. And before I close, I just want to mention tomorrow's lecture. Last week and today is based a lot on my lecture notes from my courses that I taught at the university. But tomorrow's lecture is going to be original research. And I think it'll be more difficult and more challenging, but maybe more interesting, on the relationship between knowing and believing, the relationship between knowledge and faith. So if you're around, please tune in. Any other questions, comments?
The emergence of the Buddha nature, Tathagata Garbha, is to do with the getting rid of intentionality. It's the intentionality fired by the passions, and those are absorbed. The Buddha nature emerges. But I was thinking of this in terms of the seventh consciousness, which is considered to be contaminated. Right. Because it's my liking and disliking that creates the problem, really, and also creates a sense of I. Right. Anyway, just a comment.
So really. Yeah. So Tathagata Garbha theorists, of course, recognize the existence of the manas, seventh consciousness, and they said the only way to break the power of this very strong, deeply embedded sense of I is through deep faith, experience of deep faith. So they accepted it but tackled it in their own way. Or perhaps in the Pure Land tradition, they would say, we don't have the power to get rid of the alaya vijnana ourselves, so we need to ask Amitabha Buddha or some outside power to give us the strength.
Okay, thank you, Charles, very much for a really nice, really good, thoroughly enjoyable lecture. Thank you. Thank you all for coming. please try and come, if you can, possibly tomorrow night, where we'll be talking about a really important subject, the difference between faith and belief. We're brought up in kind of Christian culture, and it seems to be a lot of it to do with belief and the idea of truth, which is the great danger. Anyway, thank you so much. So, see you, some of you tomorrow, hopefully, some of you online. Thank you.